Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
In the spirit of the Northwest, KATU presents Town Hall. Tonight on Town Hall, on Election Day, marijuana measures will be put to a vote. Should marijuana be used as medicine, or would that send the wrong message to kids? Join us as we debate the marijuana measures. That's tonight on Town Hall.
Good evening and welcome to Town Hall. My name's John Marlar. This is my first night as host of this program. It is a pleasure to be here. Let's get right to the issues. Tonight we tackle marijuana. Is it a soothing medicine, a dangerous drug, or both? On Tuesday, you'll decide by your vote whether we increase the penalties for possessing small amounts of marijuana. You'll also decide whether Oregon should become the third state in the nation to permit the medical use of marijuana. Let's begin with a closer look at Measure 67. Here's Mark Hass.
Janelle Bloom has multiple sclerosis. Sometimes her muscle spasms are so painful she almost passes out.
Last night, I had one that sort of twisted me around. I almost fell off the couch.
So, like others diagnosed with MS, Janelle smokes marijuana to relieve the pain. Many believe it's more effective than pharmaceuticals and easier on the system. The problem, though, marijuana is illegal, and Janelle, an outgoing wife, grandmother, and registered nurse, has to do business with drug dealers to buy her relief.
I am forced into the underground, into that slimy, ugly world of the underground.
Measure 67 would legalize marijuana for dying and suffering patients, allowing them to possess only small amounts. Those patients would have to have documented physician approval. And unlike California's new law, Oregon's measure would not allow clubs that sell marijuana. But as much as the law would help people like Janelle Bloom, police say it would open the door to more drug abuse.
It's really designed to break down the ability of law enforcement to deal with marijuana enforcement and then ultimately to legalize marijuana and probably other drugs in the long term.
I think that's a very hollow argument.
Dr. Richard Bayer is an internist and chief sponsor of the measure. He discovered the medicinal benefits of marijuana after working at the Veterans Hospital, where he saw vets using marijuana for spinal injuries they suffered in Vietnam.
And I've become convinced that for some patients, marijuana is simply the best option.
Whether it's an option that Oregon is ready to legalize is still uncertain. But for many people, it's an option they've already chosen, legal or not. In Portland, Mark Hass, Channel 2 News.
That's what we're talking about tonight. Let's take a closer look on your screen at what Measure 67 says would permit people diagnosed with cancer, with AIDS, and other serious illnesses to legally grow and smoke marijuana. Dr. Baer, you're on the hot seat. Why, after years, decades of talking about the evil effects of marijuana, of telling our children to say no, why are you now saying we should say yes to medical use of marijuana?
Well, John, I've seen marijuana work as medicine, and I believe that seriously ill patients should not be arrested for using their best medical option. And under Measure 67, I want to emphasize we're not really legalizing anything. All we're doing is accepting or exempting seriously ill patients from Oregon criminal laws when their doctor agrees that marijuana may help.
We have another doctor on the hot seat, Dr. Marshall Better. Why should we say no to this?
Well, I saw 10,000 patients last year, our practice, which is totally pain management. And out of those, 25% are seriously ill cancer patients. We have never had to prescribe marijuana in cigarette form. We do prescribe the active ingredient, Marinol. It's available. Physicians can use it all the time. We haven't had to resort to that, and I don't see that there is a need for this medication.
How about someone who has smoked marijuana for pain relief? Have you tried Marinol? You smoked marijuana, but have you tried Marinol? Your name, please.
They won't prescribe me Marinol.
Okay, they won't try it, so you're going to marijuana.
I've been doing that for a long time.
Have you tried Marinol?
No.
Because?
Because it hasn't been prescribed to me, and because I'm not interested in taking pharmaceuticals to begin with.
And that would be because?
I think a natural occurring substance like marijuana is more easily controlled by me, and that I can take the dose that I need and then put it down when I'm done. And I do not have to take a pharmaceutical, put it in my body, and let it chemically work its magic.
Dr. Better, we've heard a couple of reactions to this, the pharmaceutical versus this natural growing thing. Give me some feedback.
Well, this wonderful natural growing thing has 150 different active compounds in it, only one of which is THC. That's the marinol component. These other psychoactive drugs, we don't know what they do, and we don't know what dosing you're getting. The other thing, of course, is that for pain relief, it has been demonstrated that marijuana has pain-relieving properties, and it probably acts through the narcotic receptors very weakly. We have much stronger, more efficient pain medications than marijuana.
And here's what I'm concerned about. You're saying that you haven't tried these other objects, that only the marijuana is working for you. Have you tried?
Yes, I'm Stormy Ray. I'm a co-chief petitioner for Measure 67, and marinol is one option. The problem with it is very hard to regulate. I was dying in '91. I started marinol. It gave me many, many great years of active life again and dignity. However, my body built up a tolerance against it. And now I do what any normal, sane person would do in my situation. And I have experienced both. And I can tell you, we have no opponents. Disabilities knows no barriers, you guys. We have some people that are not aware of our perspective. And we wish to share that with you tonight.
John, I can help you with this.
Hold on just a second. Let me get back here with you. Your name?
John, my name's Lee Berger. I'm a lawyer. I've been defending medical marijuana patients over the last 4 years, including those that had tried marinol. Some patients, especially late-stage AIDS patients, weren't able to keep their medicines, including marinol, down. The problem is that you're not able to titrate your dosage with marinol, and it's also a problem that marinol is only synthetic THC, delta-9 cannabinol. There are 60-odd cannabinoids that there was expert testimony at Craig Helms' trial that we don't know which of these necessarily are the ones that help multiple sclerosis patients with the spasticity associated with it. So the reason why marinol isn't a good alternative is, first of all, there's no way to titrate your dosage. For people who are our age, it's like 20 years ago eating brownies, you know, to take the marinol. Secondly, it's really expensive. And thirdly, $400 a month. Yes. And thirdly, it's there are other chemicals within marijuana that may be more effective at treating these conditions.
If you don't smoke marijuana, if you don't take marinol, are there options in some of these cases? Yes, sir.
Henry Kane, my late wife suffered from pancreatic cancer. She was never in pain because whenever there was a twinge of pain, she had right in the home sufficient prescribed morphine. And whenever the dosage in the last month or two had to be increased, she was never in pain. And I would emphasize that this is not about medical marijuana. This is legalizing it, because under this bill, almost anybody can grow marijuana in unlimited amounts. I tried to challenge the ballot title, but I was unable to, and it is full of holes, and as another attorney, it is unconstitutional and cannot be enforced.
Okay, let me stop you there. You can respond in a minute. Let me bring the audience in on this. We want to give you a chance to weigh in on the issue. We have a telepoll tonight. The question, should medical use of marijuana be allowed in Oregon? If you say yes, 733-5350. If you say no, 733-5351. Dr. Baer, what kind of protections are there in here to keep people from growing whatever they want, wherever they want, using it however they want?
Well, first of all, they need to go and see their doctor, and their doctor diagnoses the debilitating conditions such as multiple sclerosis or cancer. It's pretty hard to fake cancer. The doctor has to write down that medical marijuana may help or might mitigate their condition. Then the patient takes this piece of paper, presumably their chart note, sends it to the Oregon Health Division and gets a permit ID card, which will allow them to use marijuana as medicine if they follow provisions such as no use in a public place, no use in public view, and of course that includes workplace and schools. There's no driving under the influence. The amounts they're limited to are personal use amounts, and it really doesn't affect any other laws regarding the illegal use of marijuana.
Chief, do you have a problem with that?
Yeah, I do. It would be nice if it was what Dr. Baer described, but if you look at the treatments, the medical conditions that marijuana can be used for treatments for, it's not terminal illnesses. Severe pain, which can't be diagnosed, it's based on how the patient describes their suffering. Muscle spasms, including back spasms, severe nausea. The doctors in the audience can tell you that this will open it up to anybody who chooses to ask for its use. On the other side, it's not carefully controlled. Under this bill, anybody who chooses to use marijuana can raise what's called an affirmative defense, that they are using the marijuana for medical treatment outside of that permit. What that does is that creates two separate trials for people who are arrested for marijuana offenses. Even though they don't have their permit, we have to go in and prove that they weren't using it for medicine, which is going to be difficult because there's very little evidence in the use of marijuana as medicine. We have to overcome that hurdle, then we have to attempt to prove that they violated the law itself. So the measure, as was alluded to, it's written very craftily, and under the study done by the district attorneys of this state, they have told us that the passage of this measure will make it virtually impossible to prosecute anything other than a very major commercial marijuana operation within this state.
One of the realities, though, is you have people, some of whom are in the studio, who are getting their marijuana on the streets, who would like to be able to grow it at home and have access to it. Who has a problem with growing it at home?
Hi, my name's Tony Ledger, and I'm over here from Vancouver. I'm a chronic pain patient. I'm 37 years old, and as someone pointed out, the issue with Vicodin, it's not an option for me, or serious painkillers are not an option for me. I have a family and a business to run. Growing marijuana in your own home is a very nice thing, but there are a lot of patients that can't do it. It also takes a fairly large amount of marijuana growing to ensure that you have a constant supply of that medication. It's much less expensive than Marinol. For example, I have a prescription for Marinol, and my prescription for Marinol is $1,094 a month, and my insurance company says I don't have cancer and I don't have AIDS, so they won't help me with it. And I'd like to point that out, that there's is available, but it's prohibitively expensive.
Yes.
Well, I have a problem when people say that doctors won't be able to determine what real pain is. It seems that they're able to do that when they prescribe morphine for pain and all of these other things that they do. It will be the doctors that will be calling the shots here, not the police officers. And I don't understand why these people are afraid for the other people to go in and prove their case in court. Don't they trust the legal system? All drugs can be dangerous, even caffeine, as we have just heard about the young man in North Carolina who died from eating too many caffeine pills. Drugs can be dangerous. It's a matter of how they're used. We're blocked by the federal government, and we're trying very hard to help people like this so that they don't have to hide. And if they don't have to hide, we will have a great experiment, and we will learn the truth. And the truth will emerge, and they're telling the truth. And they're not telling the truth, and we will soon know.
And they're not telling the truth because?
They're not telling the truth, because marijuana is not a dangerous drug.
She says you're not telling the truth, that marijuana is not a dangerous drug. Dr. Better.
The truth is that we're in the middle of an epidemic of drug abuse in this country. And marijuana is cited in almost every study as the gateway drug to stronger drugs. And the bill shows quite clearly that it'll be open to absolutely anyone with any complaint. And as a physician, I am worried.
Yes, I feel compelled to speak whenever Dr. Better speaks.
Go right ahead. And the rest of you jump in when you're ready.
Right. I think this is one more example of our opponents using the hyperbole of the slippery slope where they're mixing up appropriate medical use of drugs and inappropriate drug abuse. All of us in this room are against drug abuse, but we don't believe that patients should be arrested for using morphine as medicine or marijuana as medicine. So what Measure 67 does is create a safe harbor for patients so they're not arrested.
We need to go to a break, but very quickly, are these decisions the voters should be making, or are these decisions medical decisions that doctors should be making?
Should be based on science.
I'm Dr. Philip Levesque. I taught pharmacology for 40 years. Marijuana has been used in medicine for over 5,000 years. It has never caused a death. It is far safer than alcohol, tobacco, cocaine, or heroin. There's absolutely no difference about this. It is a safe drug for medical use.
I have time for one quick response. Anyone on the other side? Anyone want to disagree? Chief, it's yours.
One of the things that hasn't been talked about is the fact that marijuana is over 400 chemicals. In amongst those 400 chemicals are carcinogens, cancer-causing agents that are 400 to 700 times the level contained in tobacco. There are immune system suppressants that can impair the body's ability to fight disease by up to 40%. We know that it has an adverse impact upon brain chemistry and the ability to learn. They're touting it like it's the only drug available that's going to cure their ills. They're not talking about all the negative impacts that this drug can have on people who use it either medicinally or recreationally.
We'll take a break. We'll be right back. We've been talking about the argument that patients need marijuana for pain relief. But once it's allowed to have it, how would we keep it out of the hands of illegal users? We'll talk about the safeguards. We'll talk more about the measure. We'll talk about recreational use, statistics. We'll try to sort it out. Thank you. Please stay with us. It's part of the issue. Will a medical need be allowed to have people grow pot in their own home? We welcome you back to Town Hall. I'm John Marler. Measure 67 would permit the use of marijuana as medicine. Now, we took our cameras to the streets to find out what people had to say. Here's Street Talk.
Yes, I do believe that marijuana should be legalized for medical purposes. It is medicine. We have many, many people in this country that need it as a medicine. I think it's a terrible thing that it's been vilified the way it has.
Well, because I think it's just a way of using marijuana and making it legal for those that don't really have a problem with using it for medicinal purposes.
Marijuana probably is good for medicinal purposes. However, I'd like it to be regulated by doctors and not the government. So I would say yes, but maybe not in the measure that's coming up for this election.
One of the arguments is if you allow people to have marijuana for medicinal purposes, it may get in the hands of those who want it for other purposes. Dave Fedenke, what sort of safeguards do we have in this measure to keep that from happening?
This measure would prohibit the sale of medical marijuana under any circumstances. And that was intended to prevent the rise of cannabis buyers clubs like we've seen in California since the measure passed there. There's also a prohibition in the measure that would prohibit use in a public place or in view of a public place. And that's a very broad restriction. Public places are defined in the law. They include just about anywhere you can think of, on the streets, anywhere near schools, in hotels, motels, any place that would be in view of the public would be prohibited for medical use.
Chief, can you enforce that?
I don't think so. You have something called the American with Disabilities Act that says we can't deprive people of their use for medicine. If I have a broken leg and I want to sit here and take a codeine pill, nobody can stop me from doing that. If marijuana is recognized as medicine and I want to use my marijuana as medicine, nobody can prohibit that either.
John, that's ridiculous because this measure cannot change federal law.
This measure changes federal law.
No, it can't. A state law cannot change federal law.
Well, let's talk about
under federal law, it is a crime to possess and use marijuana. Marijuana is treated as a more dangerous drug than morphine, cocaine, or amphetamines, which can be prescribed by physicians.
Up here.
My name is Joe Marma. I'm an alcohol drug professional from the coast in Lincoln County. And the reason we're having this argument we just had is because this is not being taken through the normal processes that medicine would go through. I think myself and a lot of people that I work with agree that if there is a use for marijuana, then let it go through the regular FDA process. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we will see an increase in use among youth. Research over the last 10 years has shown that as the perception of harm or risk decreases with youth and adults, the use increases. That's been documented in Oregon here. It's been documented nationwide. So the perception that kids have right now is that marijuana is not harmful, it's a medicine, and so we're seeing a tremendous increase in use by youth.
Let's kick it around back and forth, right here.
I don't think kids are going to want to emulate sick and dying patients. Kids use marijuana for a lot of other reasons, but it's not because sick and dying people do.
Over on this side. Right here.
I'm Dr. Susan McCall, and I'm concerned that there are not adequate safeguards on this. The measure effectively bars the evaluation of any medical appropriateness by either the Board of Medical Examiners in reviewing a physician's prescribing practices or by the Health Division in reviewing whether or not the application is medically appropriate. It also allows additional conditions to be added that have not even been described at this point for treatment in the future. While we need to research what other ingredients may be effective in marijuana, they do need to be going through the normal channels. There are not other medications that we smoke. There are not other medications we vote for.
No, there's this misperception.
I don't have time. I don't have time to wait. If the doctors are going to do it, if the government's going to do it, if the voters are going to do it, whatever, do it. I've already been convicted of growing marijuana plants. I need it now. You know, whatever you're going to do it. And this bill is here, and it can be done next Tuesday, so do it.
Back on the second row, if you will.
My name is Michael Howden. I'm with the Oregon Center for Family Policy, and I'd like to comment about this issue in relationship to children. I spent 12 years working with kids out on the streets as well. I also have an 8th grader, and in Oregon, 8th grade use of marijuana has tripled. In fact, in a juvenile justice perspective, arrest for juvenile justice crimes has also just about tripled since 1986. I can tell you in their decision-making process, the way they analyze that and the way they come about making decisions related to drug abuse is wholly affected by the way society treats this issue. And if you have marijuana plants that are being grown in an unspecific, unmeasurable way inside households, the ability for other people to access that drug is only going to be increased, since right now it's illegal to do even that much, and we see that access is prevalent in that same manner.
Let's take a look at some numbers. Government statistics, mind you, some of you may want to disagree with them, but we have numbers on teen use. By the time a teen reaches age 17, 6 of 10 report having friends who have used marijuana. 4 of 10 say they have a friend with a drug problem. Again, this is the time a teen reaches the age of 17. 7 of 10 say they can buy drugs within a day, and 7 of 10 say drugs are sold and used at school. Megan, right behind you, if you would.
Thank you. My name is Becky Fahey. I'm a registered nurse, and what really concerns me about the way this law is written now is it states that licensing boards, such as the Board of Medical Examiners or the boards of nursing, cannot take action against any of their licensees if they are using marijuana for medical purposes. I'm a former investigator for the Board of Nursing. That concerns me. I wonder how much their hands are going to be tied. And as a registered nurse, it's important that it is used as medicine, and as we've alluded to here, it needs to be tested and everything more like medicine, not just grown.
Becky, thank you very much.
Yes, my name is Edward Glick. I'm also a registered nurse, and I think the humanitarian disaster that this is really representing, where patients who are sick and dying are turned into criminals for using a safe and effective drug, has no corollary in medicine. There's simply no excuse under any circumstances for turning a dying person into a criminal for using a drug that is safe and which relieves their suffering. And I've seen this in many cases as a nurse. In the ethics of nursing, nowhere do they talk about making criminals out of our patients. As far as use of teens using drugs, there's all kinds of evidence showing that Dutch youth use much less drugs, especially marijuana. In fact, it's the University of Amsterdam study that shows that teens in Holland used about two-thirds of the marijuana of American teens. The real issue here is that the marijuana use laws have been a total abject failure, and the more attention and the more criminalization that's piled onto the issue, the worse the problem gets, not better.
I didn't see who was saying it, but I was hearing you're wrong, you're wrong. Go ahead.
My name's John English. I have 4 our children's children. What we have here is 20 years of statements from people that are into legalizing marijuana that they're going to use the health issue as a red herring to get legalization for all drugs. We've got the statements. We knew what they were up to for 20 years. They're here, and it's happening now. And if you want children going over fences and taking marijuana from people who say they need it for compassion, I would ask for compassion for children.
It's a decision the voters of this state will make. If the voters say yes, Oregon will become only the 3rd state to legalize marijuana for medicinal use. Back to the hot seats. A final word on this topic before we move on to the other measure regarding marijuana. Dr. Baer, go first. Why should we say yes?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say this again because it seemed to fall on deaf ears. Measure 67 does not legalize anything. I'll say it one more time. Measure 67 does not legalize anything. All it does is it accepts or exempts dying and suffering patients from being arrested for using marijuana as medicine under their doctor's supervision. And that's all that Measure 67 does. It's a very moderate law with appropriate safeguards, and people who agree with me that seriously ill people should not be arrested should vote yes on Measure 67.
Dr. Better, you have the final word.
I believe that seriously ill people should be treated with excellent medical care, but I believe the humanitarian disaster here is the greater availability of marijuana and the diversion potential of marijuana to the youth.
Dr.
That
Better.
frightens me.
Thank you very much. Measure 67 isn't the only marijuana question on the ballot. Another plan would increase the penalty for possessing small amounts of marijuana. Up next, the case for cracking down. And we want to say welcome back. We have a terrific audience tonight. I'm John Marler. We're talking about marijuana. Actually, Chief, this is oregano. But it's an ounce. It's an ounce, and sorry, I'm moving it around there too much. It's here to show you what we're talking about in the next segment of Town Hall tonight. 25 years ago, Oregon became the first state to decriminalize possession of less than an ounce of marijuana. Now, ballot measure 57 would return Oregon to the earlier law making possession a Class C misdemeanor rather than merely a violation. So let's talk about some comparable crimes. So we know that right now marijuana possession is a violation, and let's take a look at some of the other violations. So possession of less than an ounce of marijuana is comparable to jaywalking, careless driving, speeding, offensive littering. Measure 57 would make possession a misdemeanor. So it would change it in a category with some other crimes. Becoming a misdemeanor would be comparable to trespassing, to criminal mischief, or to shoplifting items less than $50. Why do we want to do this?
You know, in 1973, Oregon took the lead trying to socialize our drug problem. We reduced it to possession of less than an ounce to an infraction in hopes that we could put more money behind treatment, prevention. I would like to be able to say that the legislature did that. However, for whatever reasons, the legislature has not. Since that time, we've seen drug use among our youth increase, and we know that we're losing. Everybody in this room has been impacted at least once. We've lost a lot of promising lives because of people getting into drug use. When we looked at this issue, we wanted not to go back to the time when we locked people up in prison for possession of less than an ounce. We wanted to find a middle ground where we increased the sanctions and thereby increased the tools in drug enforcement and also increase the number of people who are going to seek drug treatment after first contact with law enforcement.
Also on the hot seat today, Representative Floyd Przanski. You say you disagree?
I say it's poppycock. I've been prosecuted for 11 years. The reality is the law that we have on the books works and works very effective. It has a very substantial fine of $500 to $1,000 right now. And that sends a pretty strong message to the individuals who choose to use marijuana or possess less than an ounce of marijuana. The reality is if we want to work with kids, we shouldn't be paying for their court-appointed attorneys, paying for a jail cell, but instead we should be paying for their education, treatment, and prevention programs. It's been very clear that even the studies that were brought before us in the legislature said that that's the way that you're going to make the most effective use of the money and have the most impact on drug use by youth or adults is through education and prevention and treatment, not locking people up.
We have set the stage, the arguments on both sides. Should we increase the penalty for possession of marijuana? In the back row, second to the end there, if you would please, Megan. It'll take us just a moment to move the microphone. Your name, please.
Hi, my name is Pat Moran, and I'm with Tualatin Valley Center's Mainstream Youth Program. And what we see is we have about 3 decades of fairly reliable research on incarceration as a treatment for drug use and whatnot, and the outcomes are very, very poor. And what we do see, on the other hand, is a growing trend that treatment methods that we can employ for for addictions or compulsive use of substances are getting much better. And so by criminalizing the marijuana, I think we are kind of going backwards in many regards. The other issue is that this ballot really is a catch-22, because if it doesn't pass, we're also sending a message to youth that marijuana use is really not as serious of an issue that we should be looking at.
That's a very good point. The message that we send. What about the message that we send?
I think this is important when you're thinking about and talking about terms of marijuana and what its policies are, because you can go before any group, anywhere, and you ask them one question: should we legalize marijuana? You get a lot of different answers. But the one question you get one answer from is this: does our current policy work?
No.
No, it doesn't.
No.
Take a look here at the charts that shows what we're actually spending our money for in terms of law enforcement, for something that's essentially a health problem anyways. But when you look at how much money we spend and you look at this very small slice...
I'm going to pull you away from the chart because the audience really can't see it. But I think we're hearing your point.
The youth voted on this issue.
Let me move over and give you a microphone so we can hear you.
I'm Amy Claire with Oregonians for Medical Rights. I also work now on 57. This last week, Oregon high school students voted overwhelmingly in favor of Measure 67 by a margin of 67 to 37%. I think they know the difference between illegal drug use and medicinal use of marijuana. And on the issue of Measure 57, they voted that down 55-45. They understand that marijuana is a dangerous drug, and they do favor treatment over incarceration. But by making it a misdemeanor, it means 30 days of jail time. We think that treatment programs are much more effective than jail time for youth.
Chief Cahill, you know a little bit about jail time. What do you say to that argument, that we need treatment, not putting people in jail?
Well, jail time does work. I can tell you from the experience of running a jail that if an individual drives down the street and he's suspended, and the chances are in one town he doesn't go to jail for driving while suspended, misdemeanor, and the chances in another town that he does, then I can bet you that if he goes to jail for 180 days in the town that he is driving while suspended, misdemeanor, that he probably won't be driving in that town again. So there is a cause and effect relationship. Now, when you bring it back to marijuana, first of all, for the last 23 years, that this particular, 25 years, this particular issue has been in Oregon as a non-crime, we have an indication in the statistics that our youth use more drugs in middle school today in Oregon than in other states. Now, those aren't my statistics. My statistics are what I do on the street every day. And when I'm working the street, I expect support from my community. And these people that are sick, I actually have a great deal of compassion for you. I think there's got to be some way to deal with that issue. But this measure 67 is not the way to do it. And I know we are. Measure 57, it does send the wrong message to our youth. I'm in those schools almost every day talking to the kids. I'm on the street working the streets with my officers. This sends the wrong message to law enforcement. It sends the wrong message to the community. You're wrong.
So you are, or you're against stiffening the penalties?
It's obvious that Measure 57...
Which would increase the penalty.
Which will increase the potential for the penalty, but also has an effective route for treatment, just like drunk driving diversion.
Chief, thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Josiah Hill with Physicians for Social Responsibility and the Coalition of Black Men. I think it's ludicrous at this time in history that we are going to recriminalize something that has been a non-criminal event for the last 20 years, put more people in prison when we don't even have prison space now. We can't decide even to where to put a new prison, and we're going to make more people criminals by recriminalizing a law. I'd also like to point out that our prisons are full of African-American and Latino men, and these are the men that will be going to prison for these new so-called drug offenses. It's ludicrous, it's inhumane.
I know we have people here with us today who in their families have had experience with marijuana, with drugs. Anyone who would like to comment on that issue?
I have a son who watched me do drugs. I sent him the wrong message, just as these people want to send the wrong message. My son started on marijuana and he's moved into every other type of drug there is. He's spent more time in jail than he's been out. And if that's what you want for your children, you're working for it.
John, I'm Michael Rose. I'm one of the chief petitioners of Measure 57. And interestingly, the only study that's ever been done has demonstrated that there was no correlation whatsoever between the penalties and the use of marijuana. That was a 5-year study out of the University of Michigan. Governor Kitzhaber, when he signed the bill last year, said this was not going to have any effect on the use of marijuana. This was simply a police powers expansion bill. It has nothing to do with marijuana. Governor Kitzhaber recognized it a year ago.
Thank you very much. We're going to take a break. We've heard why possession should not be recriminalized, but we've also the issue that Mr. Rose just raised here. Would this law give police too much authority to stop and search? We'll look at the case against stiffer penalties as Town Hall continues.
I think that if they made that punishable by jail time and a fine, that we're going to have way overcrowded jails. I think it's nonsense to punish someone for something that, you know, is not that major of a crime when we turn into child molesters and people like that back out on the streets every day. I mean, it's crazy.
I think they should be fined $1,000, but I think they should do something with them. I don't know whether it would be a jail sentence or whether it would be to confine them to some place and clean them.
Should possession of small amounts of marijuana be recriminalized? That's the issue tonight. I'm John Marler. Welcome back to Town Hall. Representative Bowman, your thoughts. Should we recriminalize?
No, sir. John, I think we should not. When this issue came to the legislative body, it was brought by law enforcement. They said we needed to send a tough message to kids. I say the message we're sending to kids is that we're hypocrites. We cannot fund public education. We refuse to fund treatment programs, but we will continue to find ways to put you in jail, take your driver's license, make you pay a hefty fine, and then criminalize you. And so you have a record that will follow you for the rest of your life. When Chief Moose brought this issue to me in the legislative body, I said, if you guarantee me treatment for every kid who wants treatment, I'll support this bill. He said that wasn't his problem. So all law enforcement wants to do is lock them up. I mean, if we continue down this path of locking them up, it will cost us over $1 billion to implement this measure, and we can't afford it.
The additional point that was made during the legislative process, I'm George Amy, I was a state representative in the same legislative body that this was sent to the voters on. The advocates always were saying the message we got to send to our children. When Joanne and I and other legislators who opposed this said, well, what's this going to cost? Where are you going to get the money? And they said, we'll allocate sufficient funds to enforce this law. Well, the allocation of the funds was $300,000 per year. The fiscal impact that is estimated from fiscal department of the state has been $1.4 million minimum per year. So we're already at a 1.1 million shortfall for the first year of implementation and each year thereafter. This is fiscally irresponsible, and it is dangerous for the public implementation of such a program.
Chief Elkins, fiscally irresponsible, dangerous?
It's neither. You know, law enforcement is currently enforcing possession of less than an ounce of marijuana as an infraction level. We're the ones that are out there and get to see the impact. We're the ones that get to see those kids every single day, get to see the repeat offenders. I doubt that they're crowding into either Representative Przanski or Representative Amy's offices. We're the ones who get to see them move on into further crime, to steal for their habits. We're the one that get to see them involved in reckless behavior as a result of their habits. It would be fiscally and socially irresponsible not to increase the penalties.
Your name?
Hi, I'm Micah. I am those kids.
Tell me your story.
I started using drugs a couple years ago. Used marijuana. Went into other stuff, but it was basically marijuana. Treatment worked for me. I've seen it work for other people. And this is money they're putting into law enforcement, which needs to go into treatment, because that works a lot better than putting someone in jail, and I've seen it firsthand. I've lived it.
Having first-hand experience with drug use myself, I really don't think that being put into jail would have made any impact on. I mean, the only thing that would have happened would be like psychological trauma from being locked up in a room full of tough, mean guys. So oh, by the way, my name's Finian Small, and anyway. So, no, I really do. I agree with Micah here that putting the money into jails is not a wise choice to make for a community, and that treatment is what works.
2 votes against. Who wants to stand with the chief? And Megan, if I could get you to move back here, please. You've got the most aggressive hand. It's yours.
First, right now, we are telling our kids, and I have a grandson in middle school, that smoking marijuana is not a crime just so long as you only have less than an ounce on you. It's not a crime until you have a little more. And the drug pushers are the ones who are all for killing this measure. But what riles me the most is the advertising literature on Measure 57, that is to vote no. It shows Tom McCall, but they don't say that Tom McCall's son died of a drug overdose on the living room floor of his mother's apartment. Marijuana has the effect of interfering with brain processes, and would you want to be operated on by somebody high on marijuana? The kids should know that it leads on to other things.
Representative Przanski.
John, you know, one of the things that really frustrates me as a prosecutor and also as a legislator is when I have people come in front of our committees and tell us one thing when they've said something else. Chief Moose from here in Portland has been one of the co-chairs for the Regional Drug Initiative Program. And in 2 different studies or reports each year, he has stated that the way we're going to make the most impact and have the most effective use is through education, treatment, and prevention. And then all of a sudden we hear that we have to do something about putting people in jail. The reality, we've heard from young people who've been down that road, let's put the money where it's going to count the most, and that's in education, treatment, and prevention.
Hi.
I'll hold it. That's
okay. I'm Dr. Robin Blair, Director of Behavioral Health Services at Woodland Park Hospital. I work in treatment. And one of the things that I know about treatment is that sometimes you need a hammer. My specialty and background is with kids, with adolescents, the population that we're talking about. My understanding of this measure is not that we're looking to put kids in jail. My understanding is we're looking to have another tool, another deterrent, another factor that says, hey, wait, here's the hammer. And it's not necessarily, yes, it says 30 days, but when's the last time that somebody went in for 30 days of shoplifting? And I'm not saying that on one side of this issue or the other. Treatment works, but you need tools to make treatment work, and maybe this is another tool.
How about that? It's a hammer.
Well, it's a hammer, but it's a hypocritical hammer. If we're not going to use the potential 30 days in jail, the message that we're sending is we're not really meaning it. What the other part of that message is that the Oregon Youth Authority budget for alternative placements for at-risk youth was slashed by $500,000 in the last session. What kind of message are we sending there? The message is, as Representative Przanski said, we're more interested in paying for locking people up, for courts, for lawyers, for court-appointed lawyers than we are for treatment. All this talk of treatment is through our hats.
John? Unfortunately, as happens in programs like this, the clockwork is against us. We're running out of time on this issue. It's time to have some closing thoughts right now. We're going to start with Chief Elkins. Chief Elkins, why should people vote yes on 57?
Well, the frustration that we have is you're hearing people say how irresponsible this bill is, how it won't work. Our frustration is that we've tried something for 25 years and know without a doubt that it hasn't worked and it will continue not to work. We're asking for a new social experiment. We're not asking to go back to the dark ages, locking people up. We're asking for a bill that was drafted by law enforcement and treatment professionals that puts a heavier hammer than what currently exists, but it also creates an avenue to get people into drug treatment far earlier in their cycle of addiction. And I would challenge the representatives that are here speaking against this, if they believe so firmly that treatment and education is the way to do this, I would challenge them to put their money where their mouth is and have the first bill that they put into the new legislature be to fund through the state these treatment and education.
Representative Przanski, you have the last word. You also have the challenge.
Thank you very much. I will welcome that challenge. The reality is, as long as we're numerically challenged at the legislature, we're not going to be able to move this type of legislation through. And the reality is what we need to look at is what's happened in 1973. Tom McCall signed that bill, and when he signed that, he stated, the solution is not to toss youthful users into jail or prison. We long ago recognized alcoholism to be a disease and abandoned the efforts of treating alcoholics by simply locking them up. The certified smart people have spoken on this. The studies that were brought to us by the proponents of this bill all said and demonstrated education, prevention, and treatment. not jail cells or paying for a defense attorney, is going to be the way that you're going to impact anyone's use of drugs. And that's what we need to do, and we do at the legislature need to put the money into it. I hope you will work the halls just as hard as I have worked them to make certain that the people who are in charge that let the bills go through will let us do the money that way. Rob, I hope you'll be there with me.
I will. Representative, thank you very much. I'd like to thank everyone who's been here tonight to talk about both sides. We hope that we've helped you decide how you're going to vote on Tuesday. Now, we do have a few minutes left to cast your vote on our first ballot question tonight, 67, and that was the medical use of marijuana. Should that be allowed in Oregon? It's our telepoll. If you say yes, 733-5350. If you say no, 733-5351. And that is our telepoll. Those results coming up next, plus your comments on last week's debate. Also tonight, we ask you to tell us what you thought about allowing the medical use of marijuana in Oregon. Let's take a look at the telepoll results from phone calls tonight. Should medical use of marijuana be allowed in Oregon? 67% of those who participated said yes, 33% said no. On my first night, our thanks to our producers, our technical staff, a terrific audience, and the viewers. We'll be back next week for Town Hall. Good night.
I'm going to do a Lowell George song. It's a trucker's favorite.
One of mine, too.
All right, here we go. Warped by the rain, driven by the snow, drunk and dirty, don't you know that I'm still, Lord, I'm still. Out on the road late last night, I seen my pretty Alice in every headlight. Alice, Dallas Alice, I've been from Tucson to Tucumcari, to Hatchapee to Tonopah, driven every kind of rig that's ever been made, driven by the back road so would not get weighed. If you give me weed, whites, and wine, you show me a sign, I'll be willing to be moving. Kicked by the rain, driven by the sleet, had my head stoved in, but I'm still on my feet, and I'm still, Lord, I'm still. Smuggled some smoking folks from Mexico, baked by the sun every time I go to Mexico. And I'm willing, I've been from Tucson to Tucumcari, to Hatchapee to Tonopah, doing every kind of rig that's ever been made, driven by the back roads so I would not get weighed. If you give me weed, whites, and wine, you show me a sign, I'll be willing to be moving.
You are now a recording artist, and you have a number of albums out there. I guess, was it Jackson Brown who first brought you into the studio? Or how did that come about?
Well,
It came about, you know, I spent a lot of time as a political activist.
Right.
And then for me, as an individual, I came to understand that that identity didn't work for me, right? Because it limited my perception of reality, because I was participating in reality from the perception of a political activist. And no matter how righteous my activism is, no matter how righteous my cause, I'm limiting my ability to see because I'm only seeing as a political activist. And that has its own limitations, because I think there are larger understandings that as human beings we need to be able to experience, maybe, all right? Yeah. So in that whole, as all that's going on through my head and consciousness, I started writing. And I started writing, and then yes, Jackson took me in. I was kind of like a fugitive, and Jackson took me in and into the world of music while I was writing. And then at some point I got the idea, well, I want to put my lines with music, but as spoken word. You know, so then I wandered off into that to see where it would go, and here I am.
I remember must have been more than 20 years ago I first came across a cassette of yours. It was This is in El Salvador.
But This is in El Salvador. Yeah.
Right. It was really a powerful. Was that one of your first ones?
It was the fourth album.
Fourth album?
We made Tribal Voice, which was the poetry with the tribal music. And then 3 years passed, and then I met Jesse Ed Davis, and with Jesse Ed Davis I made Graffiti, aka Graffiti Man, which is now with the electric music.
Right.
And then we made Heart Jump Bouquet, and then we made But This Is in El Salvador. I think in 1987 we recorded that.
Right.
We like that tune, Grass Fire, man.
Grass Fire, yeah.
My DNA needs THC.
My DNA
awesome
needs THC.
Tune,
Well, it's reality.
Yeah,
This is
and
true.
it does.
Be real
It's
sometimes.
amazing how the science is backing that up more and more every day. And we often talk about it here, how, you know, just in, what was it, 93, they discovered that our bodies have this whole endogenous cannabinoid system where we have these artificial cannabinoids that kind of modulate the rest of the endocrine system, the body's hormones and everything.
Well, you know, I think
we do need THC.
Yeah, no,
in fact,
we do.
mother's milk has endogenous THC in it.
No, that's why my DNA needs THC. There's a reason, right, that it gets said. But you know what I'm interested in, I mean, in a way, is like, because what you're saying about this, see, I think that, what is this, cannabis sense?
Yeah, cannabis common sense.
Well, see, what makes cannabis common sense to me is I think we really need to start putting some efforts into the legalization of industrial hemp. If we put as much effort and energy into the legalization of industrial hemp as we put into hemp that we can smoke, if we put an equal amount of energy into that, because that serves, it meets a larger objective of alternative energy, because, I mean, you know, I won't make the speech, but we make the fuels and the food and all this stuff, all right, and it's you know, and I've had this lingering curiosity in the back of my consciousness, as active as the cannabis movement is in its various levels and perceptions, right, that I don't quite get why more energy isn't put into that. You know, because it would save the farmers and all. I mean, there's so much that could be, and everybody's talking, see, and people are starting to sit back now. The political system's starting to talk about, well, in order to meet our oil needs, we'll do offshore drilling. You know, and people are, see, and I don't see it coming. No, in order to meet some of these energy needs, industrial hemp.
Yeah, we often talk about this study out of Notre Dame University in 1975. It's published in a magazine called The Midlands Naturalist, and it's feral hemp in southern Illinois. According to that study, an acre of hemp will make 4 tons of hemp seed, and 4 tons of hemp seed will make 300 gallons of biodiesel fuel or oil.
So to me, those of us who come from the hemp community, see, this should be the alternative form of energy that we're putting up. If we put as much effort into getting medicine for the earth as we put into getting it for ourselves, see, we have the energy to do it. It's just the focus and the consciousness. Because what I see as the imbalance, we're talking about the benefits of hemp or marijuana medicinally, all right, for us. But it also serves the same medicinal benefit for the earth. You know, and it does, but we're not putting an equal effort into what it does for the earth as we're putting into what it does for us. And because what I don't see it really happening anywhere to a large degree, but what we really need to have is we really need to have a stimulation of the energy consciousness.
Should have been hemp
The energy.
Here, John, our theme was industrial hemp, man. We
Yeah,
had
see,
a
and this should
serious
be-
emphasis
Yeah.
going
See,
on,
and it should
man,
be-
on alternative energy.
Now this is the whole reason marijuana is illegal. Yep. This is hemp seed oil with a hemp wick. And it is an illuminant. Hemp was an original illuminant before they used whale oil, before they were using petroleum. Hemp seed oil was one of the first illuminants used by humanity to light the first lamps. And this is the whole reason it's illegal, because you can pour this hemp oil right into any diesel engine, turn the key and drive it. Hemp oil produces 3 times more seed oil than any other plant on the planet. It also produces 3 times more fiber. And here's some hemp twine. This is produced in China. Hemp twine from China. So the main reason marijuana is illegal is because of hemp oil and hemp fiber. And marijuana laws were created to stop the oil companies from competing with hemp fiber, with the introduction of new machinery that made hemp fuel and fiber much less expensive and much less expensive to process. Much as the cotton gin had made cotton much cheaper to process 100 years before. This new machinery, the decorticator, had made hemp fiber much cheaper. So the fuel and fiber companies put together a misinformation campaign we know as Reefer Madness and came up with this name marijuana based on racist lies, as the name marijuana proves. I mean, it's based on anti-Hispanic and people of color racist propaganda that was prevalent in the 20s and 30s. And so here is the whole reason that marijuana is illegal. It has nothing to do with drugs. Drugs are a smokescreen. It's really about fuel and fiber.
Exactly.
And there's we're going to do this every week, folks.
Well, and what
I just love the hemp candle idea. So this is our flame of freedom that we're going to be talking about each and every. I want to thank you guys for watching. We're going to go out on another great song by Mr. John Coronet. We'll be back next week and help us restore hemp.
Yeah, restore hemp.
Another chapter as we turn the page. We exist within a Ukraine. I know that freedom's heard around the globe. Just where our future lies will nobody know. Oh, let's make the best of it now. 'Cause you never know when the sky will fall. Maybe the moon will reach the earth one day. We're not the same race that we used to be. Can't you see? Now the next time that you fall in